Anarchism in Latin America was very strong in the late 19th century, early 20th century, but it really collapsed and it couldn't, by the 20s and 30s it became a really minority force almost everywhere. You could say that the exceptions were probably Uruguay and Cuba, but those were to a large degree exceptions that confirmed the rule because they were doing things very differently to the rest of anarchists in Latin America. So anarchists in Latin America really had a very quick rise. It helped to set up the foundations of most of the social movements in Latin America, from trade unions to student movements, tenants leagues, and so on and so forth. So it is, to a certain degree, part of a collective subconscious of the Latin American social movements. And what you see in the early 21st century, this massive anti-neoliberal rebellions, to one or another degree, show that this basic kind of almost genetical contribution of anarchism to the social movements is pretty much there, dormant, but it's there. But as I said, by the 20s and 30s, they really lost ground to Marxist-Leninism, in particular to the communist parties. Then it lost ground to the Catholic-based movements like liberation theology really took over anarchism because it had a very, very dogmatic views on religion, didn't know how to deal with that phenomenon. That could have been potentially being quite helpful in terms of advancing the anarchist cause, and because they couldn't cope as well with the changing scenario of a state of welfare. I mean, it's not in Latin America we ever had a state of welfare like, in Europe, that you get Zoe and so on. But you had a state that started intervening in the economy, that started nationalizing, that started actively promoting economic development, at least of industrialization in certain areas. You had a state that gave you a pension, you had a state that gave you certain rights, very basic rights, but some hours of work a week, Monday, a holiday on Sunday, that gave you a pension and stuff like that. And you might say it's not probably a big deal, but when you had nothing, it was a big deal. And those nationalist populist movement really capitalized. Anarchism didn't know how to react to that changing scenario. I think that anarchism is becoming more relevant now because that scenario has changed again, and people again have not much to lose. But we have to really learn from that past and apply those lessons. So if things start changing again, we don't lag behind, and we're not left again as a voice alone in the desert. Because I do believe that anarchism potentially could play a big role in Latin American revolutions. I have no doubt it will come or are on the making as we're speaking now. But now coming back again to the issue, the anarchism started to revive in Latin America in the mid-80s, late 80s, but then it really exploded in the 90s. And I'm part of that early generation of kind of people that rediscovered anarchism, and we were thrilled to know that in the 20s and 30s anarchists were around. It was kind of a big thing. You said like, whoa, we have roots here, so it was important. But we were aware as well that we were a completely different generation, that there was a gap. There was very, very few comrades from the olden days. I mean, you had a couple of them in Chile that were my mentors in terms of anarchist politics: Hugo Cartel, a shoemaker, Eguaguirre in particular, a mechanic, the movement started to grow a lot through youth groups, counterculture, but it really started moving in the late 90s. And I think that the anarchist communist tendency, platformism as they call it in the English-speaking world, we never called it that, really had a strong influence on that. Anarchists starting to get to work in unions and to start getting work in student movements and in your own neighborhoods. And the movement has grown a lot over the last 10 years in terms of experience. It's a very young movement still, but no matter it's a very young movement, I think it's a movement that today has a lot to show that we didn't have back in the 90s. Now we have solid experience in a number of trades, we have solid experience in a number of movements, and we've become a force to be recognized by other political actors, and that's positive.